What's up, Raptors fans? Welcome to the Warriors Report. We have some very interesting news about the Raptors to talk about today. So they've been linked to some players, as well as some reports have come out that the Raptors are looking for a starting center. This is being reported by Michael Scotto. And shout out to Rhapsody as always. They post some awesome and quick Raptors updates on their IG. So shout out to them. But the Raptors are looking for a starting center, and this shouldn't really come as a surprise given their situation with Precious Achiuwa and Khem Birch. And Khem Birch, who's just been dealing with nagging injuries the entire season, it seems like. We've essentially had Precious Achiuwa, who's also, let's be honest, he's been dealing with some injuries himself, but we've essentially had Precious and Chris Boucher kind of trying to man down that center position. We know Chris Boucher, ideally, he's a power forward. He's also got an expiring contract, so we'll see what the Raptors do with him. But for today's video, I'm going to break this news down, as well as talk about two players the Raptors were linked to today. So if you guys are ready to watch this video, make sure to like the video. It does help it get out a lot more. And if you want to hit the subscribe button, we're super close to 2,900 subscribers. That'd be awesome as well. So with that being said, let's get into today's video. Now, the shout out for today's video goes out to Team Lucid Gaming. So Team Lucid, thank you so much for supporting this channel to your likes and comments. It is very much appreciated. Now, I normally don't do this, but I'm in deep core. Shout out goes out to you as well. You've been asking me on several videos to give you a shout out. So here is your shout out. And thank you for your continued support as well. It is very much appreciated. Now let's talk about the first player that the Raptors are being linked to. Now this one shouldn't really come as a surprise because the Raptors have been linked to, or Jakob Poeltl has been linked to the Raptors before, but we're getting some news that the Raptors have called the Spurs regarding Jakob Poeltl. Now, again, I give a shout out to Rhapsody, shout out to Raptors community on IG as well. I mean, you guys are awesome at posting quick updates about the Raptors, but this one's really interesting because we obviously hear rumors, all the time about Raptors being linked to certain players. And this one, I don't know how much truth there is to it, but this could be something big because Jakob Poeltl, for several reasons I've talked about in the past, he fits in with the Raptors system so well, right? When we talk about his stats, that's the big thing with me personally, is the fact that he solves the Raptors' issues at the center position because he's listed at 7'1", 245 pounds, I believe. So he gives you, not only is he a taller center, he gives you a little bit more physical size as well, just kind of being that rim protector as well. As you see there, he's averaging 1.7 blocks, which is good for 6th in the league in the NBA. That would be huge for the Raptors, just having a legitimate center kind of just manning down the defense. He's also a really smart defensive player as well. He moves his feet fairly well. He can switch on other defenders. I wouldn't say he can guard point guards. I wouldn't go as far as to say that, but he's a player who can definitely do a decent job at defending other positions. And look, having someone that can give you that many blocks is just great because we know the Raptors often double team centers, and that just leads to them having a lot of open three-pointers, which they often make. But just in terms of what he would give you, 13 points, 9 rebounds is also big. And the one thing that really goes underappreciated by Jakob Poeltl, and this is something he did so well with the Raptors, is the assist column. Look at those assists for a center is really good, 2.8 assists, and they don't have a lot of great players on that team. So imagine how many more assists he'd be averaging on the Raptors that have Gary Trent Jr., Pascal, Fred VanVleet, OG. He'd be surrounded by three-point shooters all around. So personally, I think he would be amazing. He's obviously been on the Raptors before. Just the chemistry he's formed with guys. Obviously, remember that bench mob of Fred VanVleet, Pascal Siakam. He's obviously familiar with our team, our chemistry, and how we run things. And another thing we need to consider is he's fairly young. I know they have the age wrong on this one for some reason. He's 26 years old. He's making 8.7 million. Even 9 million isn't too bad for next season, but the Raptors aren't necessarily tied up in a long-term deal with him, right? So I think Jakob Poeltl, I know they're looking for a starting center. I think he would be the perfect, ideal backup center. But if the Raptors are not able to acquire a starting center, which I don't think they will be, I think Jakob Poeltl would be a perfect starting center for them. But just in terms of Jakob Poeltl and how he would fit in with the team, I think it just makes perfect sense. Obviously, there are some concerns. He can't stretch the floor. His free throw percentages are awful this season. But when you talk about what the Spurs would want in return, we do have to be realistic. We can't just say Chris Boucher in a second-round pick. I think the Spurs would want a little bit more. I think giving him someone like, heck, I would even be willing up to give up Khem Birch. That's how much I like Jakob Poeltl. It's unfortunate, but Khem Birch has just dealt with a lot of injuries, and he's had that knee issue, which is a big concern for me personally because he's 29 years old, and he's on the wrong side of the 20s, and you don't want your big man to be dealing with knee issues. It's only going to get worse as they age. So personally, I'd be okay with giving up Khem Birch and let's say a Malachi Flynn and even a second-round pick. I know some people A lot of mock trades from Raptors fans have said they'd give up Precious Achiuwa. I think that's a little bit too much. I wouldn't give up Precious Achiuwa or even a first-round draft pick. But again, it all depends on how Masai Ujiri does trades. We know he's absolutely ripped off other teams, Spurs being one of them. I wouldn't say he's ripped them off, but he's gotten a pretty good deal for Kawhi Leonard. So we'll wait and see what happens, but I'd personally love Jakob Poeltl. Now let's talk about the second player that has been linked to the Raptors today. And this one, I'm not going to lie, is a little bit surprising. So Raptors continuing search for bigs, believed to be in on Daniel Theis. Now, personally, I don't know how you guys feel about this one. I'm not too big on Daniel Theis, but let's talk about him for a second. When you talk about Daniel Theis, we know he was with the Celtics for quite a while. He was with Chicago. He signed that deal, and then he was with the Houston Rockets this year. So just taking a look at some of his statistics, he's listed at, I believe, 6'8", 245 pounds. So he does provide a little bit of physicality. He's not the tallest center, so it's not going to have a huge difference, in terms of having him and Kem Birch or Precious Achiuwa. I think he just has a little bit more weight to him. He's a smart, high IQ player. If we talk about some of his positives and what he'd bring to the Raptors, we saw him play against us in that Celtics series in the playoffs very well. I think he just fits in with the team, not particularly the Raptors, just with any teams in terms of he's not a selfish player. He'll play the role he's assigned and he'll play it really well. So he's not a starting center by any means. He is a really good backup center. But when you talk about Daniel Tyson, what he'd give you, 8.5 points, 5 rebounds, and not much else, right? Not much else. He's trying to shoot more threes this season. As you see, he's averaging 3 3-pointers, and he's only making about 29% of them. So at least he's trying, and he's doing this in 22.5 minutes. I personally don't think the Raptors should try to acquire Daniel Theis because for some of the reasons I've talked about, right? If the Raptors are looking for a starting center, I don't think it makes a lot of sense to acquire a backup center. Now, when you talk about his money and how much money he's making, you take a look at that. And it's similar to Jakob Poeltl, so around the $8-9 million. He's not making too much, which means he shouldn't be too difficult to trade for. But it'll be interesting to see what the Raptors do come trade deadline. I don't think Daniel Theis is the player that we should be trading for personally. I don't know how much more he brings than a Kem Birch or Precious Achiuwa, right? If I'm being honest, yes, he does have a little bit more weight to him, about 20 pounds more, 15, 20 pounds more than our starting centers, but he's not that tall center we're looking for, and he's definitely not a starting center. So it'll be interesting what the Raptors do. It'll be very interesting because if the Raptors are looking for a starting center, who goes to the bench? Do we potentially, again, I'm not throwing names out there of who we should trade for a starting center, but does Gary Trent Jr. potentially get moved? Does OG Anunoby potentially get moved? Again, we'll have to wait and see. I know the reports came out a few days ago that the Raptors are not willing to part with Pascal, Gary Trent, or excuse me, it was Fred VanVleet, Scotty Barnes, and OG Anunoby. But you know what? You never know about reports, and you never know. We heard the same thing about DeMar DeRozan and him not being moved, and then he got traded. So we'll wait and see what the trade deadline brings and what the Raptors actually do come the NBA trade deadline. It'll be very exciting to see. But I do want to ask you guys, how do you guys feel about Jakob Poeltl and in particular Daniel Theis? Do you think the Raptors should go for them? What starting center do you think the Raptors should go for? Personally, I think it makes sense to go for a starting center. I just don't think it makes a lot of sense to go for someone like Daniel Theis just because it's a lateral move. It's not going to improve the Raptors' chances of making the playoffs or even improving their chances of going further in the playoffs by much if you acquire someone like Daniel Theis. So that's just my opinion, but I do want to hear from you guys. Let me know your thoughts in the comment section below. And as always, guys, I do have a trivia question for you today. And since we're talking about Daniel Theis, let's talk about how many points did Daniel Theis average versus the Raptors in that playoff. So we remember that series against the Celtics in the bubble. How many points did he average? Is it A, 9.5? Is it B, 7.3? Is it C, 8.2, or is it D, 8.9? So whoever answers this trivia question correctly first in the comment section gets a shout out in my next video. So I just want to thank you guys for your support. Make sure to leave your thoughts down below. I will be reading your comments and I always like to reply to them. So I just want to thank you so much for watching this video, and I hope you guys have yourselves a great day.